fellow readers, it's me Marie. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're doing something based on frequently asked questions I get over on my Instagram, Bookish Marie, where I post sort of more of my love of horror and books. And Stephen King being one of my favourite authors, he gets featured quite frequently. And I get asked quite a lot because the Bookstagram community, if you guys aren't familiar, it's primarily sort of fantasy and young adult, I would say, is what kind of gets featured the most. I'm not interested in either of those things. There are exceptions, but it's not my cup of tea. Now, obviously, within the Bookstagram community, you have sort of individual niches, but that's kind of like the main, you know, the big books that you see hit the charts. They're the ones that kind of get featured the most. The ones that I'm more interested in is obviously horror, and there is a horror community amongst it. But I do get a lot of people on my page who aren't necessarily going to be picking up horror as their first choice. And as such, I kind of become like a go-to for spooky reads, which is, like, I love it. I love being like the sensei, the mummy to advise people on horror books. And Stephen King, I get asked quite a lot about, particularly what books I would kind of recommend if you're reading Stephen King for the first time, to get a feel for him, and that you kind of obviously are getting the best of his work. So I thought I would put together a little list of my kind of recommendations out of all his classic books, because let's face it, guys, Stephen King is bloody prolific. He has written an insane amount of books, and they've been made into an insane amount of TV shows and movies, and it's kind of overwhelming to somebody who's coming to Stephen King for the first time. And some of his books are bloody gigantic. Like, you could legitimately beat someone to death with a copy of The Stand. Like, honestly, it's huge. So again, it kind of puts people off sometimes, and they're not sure where to start amongst this giant list. So I always, with authors, tend to go straight for their kind of back catalogue, straight for the classics, the stuff with Stephen King that kind of made him the king of horror. And then I've put together sort of my few favourites. This coincided with a company called Mapiful approaching me to do a kind of collaboration. So Mapiful, if you're unfamiliar with them, they're not sponsoring the video or anything, but they came to me about a collab. They are a company where you can kind of design and make art, and it's mostly, there's sort of three main types. There are maps, there are like street maps, there are country maps, there are star kind of maps, and then there are also these new ones which are kind of like text posters, and you can create posters, choose what way you want to have it hung, framed, and it's a really good way of having a like personalized piece of art on your wall. I've worked with them before. I made a map of Belfast, and it actually hangs on my kitchen wall downstairs right now. It's a really good company, very stylish. You'd be able to make one to your specifications to suit every room, is essentially the vibe. But they're wanting to sort of demonstrate that it's not just necessarily your kind of minimalist map sort of vibe that they're known for, that you can create anything. So being spooky season, they've approached people like myself who are more into the fantasy worlds than reality, let's put it that way. And they challenged us to create a poster, either a star map or a text image of a fantasy kind of world. And that is what I've done. And I thought, as soon as I got the email, and I'd already been thinking about making this video, I was like, I'm going to make a Stephen King one. Straight away. So I actually made a couple, but this was my favourite design. I went for a text poster, and I basically have essentially kind of designed my own kind of like movie poster sort of / book poster. And I'll let you guys see what you think. Oh. So this is my poster here. Isn't that gorgeous? So first up, obviously instantly recognisable, I've went for The Shining, which is one of my favourite Stephen King books. I will put a picture of this, like little clips of it, so you can see it from far away rather than up close, which is the way I have to film. But the way the text images work is that you can have any text on a repeat pattern with any image, and then the image itself is made out of the text. So what I decided to do was to go for the very, very recognisable carpet from the Overlook Hotel from the Stanley Kubrick adaptation of The Shining. And this quote here is the Stephen King quote that says that ghosts are real, monsters are real too, they live inside us, and sometimes they win. That particular quote. So that is on repeat, I don't know if you can kind of see, and makes up this pattern. Then at the bottom, I've put The Shining, Stephen King. And then I decided to put a second quote, which is sometimes human places create human monsters, which is one of my favourite quotes about the Overlook Hotel itself. So it's kind of like an Overlook advertising poster. You can choose to frame them, but I thought these are very cool. These little wooden things that you kind of hang the poster like this. There's a bit of wood at the top and a bit of wood at the bottom. Did not realise until they arrived that these are actually magnetic, which is really cool. So you can reuse these with different posters and kind of switch up your decor every now and then. But that's how I've created my particular Mapiful poster. So I'm going to put a link down below to see if you want to kind of create your own design and give it a try. I made I made like a version for it, and I made a version with for Firestarter and stuff like that, but this is the one that I really just thought was the coolest, and this is going to actually hang on my wall over here when we're all done. But yeah, so the collab I thought was perfectly timed to introduce my list. So as I said, I will put the link down below, and if you fancy creating your own Mapiful poster, whether it's a text one or whatever, you know, they can do, obviously it doesn't have to be horror like that. You could have like a wedding image of like one of your wedding pictures, and then like maybe your vows or something, making up the image, something like sweet and pretty like that. But obviously I've gone straight for horror, and hence, you know, this is why Mapiful approached me during spooky season, because they wanted me to go into that realm of darkness and create something a little bit different and show you that you can do anything with their design programs. So that's my picture. Let me know what you think. Link down below if you want to give it a go. But that segues perfectly into my first King recommendation, because if you're talking classic King, you can't not discuss The Shining. This isn't a short book, but it's not a huge one either. It's a perfectly manageable read. I have deliberately discounted it, even though I love it, because it's gigantic, and because of that scene in the middle being just super weird. But I wouldn't discourage you from reading it if that's the first Stephen King you want to pick up, or any of the others. Go for it. This is just the ones I would kind of recommend if you're sort of new to King, or they're kind of my personal favorite of all his classics. So The Shining, if you're unfamiliar with the story, is about Danny Torrance. He has a gift, a psychic gift known as The Shining, hence the title of the book. His father Jack and his mother end up taking a job as caretaker at the Overlook Hotel. It's this big old hotel right up in the mountains that gets cut off completely due to the snow during the winter months, and they require a live-in caretaker to keep the boiler running and stop it essentially like falling into disrepair and ruin, ready for the new season in spring. But the Overlook Hotel is not everything that it seems. There are lots of awful, tragic things that have happened there, lots of deaths, there's been murders, and it is essentially a kind of hub of psychic energy and paranormal activity. And the hotel almost has a life of itself. And when it realizes that the young boy Danny has this gift, The Shining, it wants the boy. It wants to kill him and possess him like it has so many other spirits, and use that energy to make itself more powerful. And the way that it goes about that is by kind of poisoning the mind of his father Jack. It's a fantastic book filled with lots of spookiness, and it's in my opinion, you know, it's King at his spooky best. There are ghosts, there are poltergeists, there are some really disturbing moments, and there's also quite touching moments as well. I love this book. I do love the Stanley Kubrick adaptation, I have to say. I think it's fantastic, but it does digress from the book quite a bit, particularly in that Jack in the movie is a bit of an arsehole. Doesn't seem overly to care for his family at all. Whereas in the book, you very much feel his struggle, his kind of fight with that evil. Like, he wants to give into the hotel and be a part of it, but at the same time, he doesn't want to hurt his family. That's sort of more centric in the book, and that's something that Stephen King personally didn't like about the movie, and he ended up working on a TV adaptation, which is also very good. Not as good, but it is good. So yeah, I mean, to me, this is it's just King perfection. His classics all are. Don't get me wrong, he's still writing fantastic books, but when you think King, these are the ones that you think about. So that's a great one to try if you haven't read it already or you're new to Stephen King. Next up, I'm going to talk about the first Stephen King that I ever personally read, which was Misery. I read this when I was maybe 10, 11 years old. It was a little raggedy copy that I got in a charity shop, and it was a cover sort of similar to this one with the blood-splattered typewriter that kind of drew me over, and I loved the sound of it and went for it, and it's probably one of the reasons that I'm into horror reading to this day, and specifically Stephen King, because it definitely made a fan of me. This is about a writer, a very famous writer, like Stephen himself, who ends up in a car accident out in a kind of like remote, isolated area in the middle of winter. And he's very badly hurt, but luckily he gets rescued by a woman who also happens to be A, a nurse, great, and B, his biggest fan. Perfect, right? I mean, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like a bad story. This sounds like a great story. Well, she also happens to be a complete loony bin psychopath. And when she finds out that he kills off the main character of his famous book series, that all comes to the fore. This is it all takes place in this one small location with these two key players, and it is just one of the tensest books I have ever read. There are moments in this book and the movie adaptation with Kathy Bates. Oh my god, that movie's fantastic. There are moments where you hold your breath because you're like, oh my god. It is a great read. It's not the longest of his many books, and it is a really, really good read. It's not, it kind of diverges. This is why I've chosen the ones that I've chosen. This is paranormal. This is your ghost. This is your poltergeist. This is psychic energy. This is grounded in reality. This is your good old-fashioned psychopath. Just hit that candle. Dangerous. And these two books together show you and demonstrate how fantastic a writer Stephen King is, because he can take horror in either direction. He can go extreme one way, into a complete otherworldliness, or he can stay grounded very much in the real world, and either way, it's going to give you nightmares. So definitely recommend that. Next up we have Carrie. Again, classic. This is a much smaller book and a much faster read. This will be the quickest of all of the books that I'm recommending. But everybody knows this story. Everybody's seen that movie, at least you should have, about the young girl Carrie who is going through life's changes. She's an outcast. She's a lonely, misunderstood girl. And when all of this stuff is happening, it creates a sort of turmoil within her, an emotional turmoil, but also she realizes that she has telekinetic abilities. Put into the fore also the fact that her mum is a very strict, religious, not particularly sympathetic or empathetic woman, and Carrie has got one hell of a crappy upbringing in general, but teenage years are gonna suck for Carrie. Bullied, no friends, nobody who cares about her. Her mum treats her like some kind of devil child because she happens to be becoming a woman. And yeah, it explores everything from burgeoning sexuality, self-discovery, but also, you know, in typical King fashion, it does that, magnifies that with some kind of horror element. And in this element we have this telekinetic ability, because Carrie, oh boy, is she powerful, and you do not want to cross her. I definitely recommend this book. It's a good one to read because it kind of combines my two previous points. The story is something that you have very much read before. It's something that you may have experienced yourself. You may yourself have been bullied. You may yourself have gone through physical changes and experiences in your teenage years. We all did. that you find confusing and difficult. And from that sense, this is a book that most people, particularly women, can relate to, but it has that otherworldly element to it as well. So I definitely think that's a great one to start with if you're looking for a king read. We're going to go next to Pet Sematary. Now this one is one of the longer ones, but trust me, it is worth it. This is about a family who moved to a remote town and then this new farmhouse, and they realise at the back they've got this pet cemetery where all the local children bury their pets. But that's not really the real cemetery. There is one much further into the woods, which is an Indian burial ground. And the soil in that cemetery is cursed and tainted and wrong, but it's also very powerful. When you bury things in that cemetery, they come back, but they don't come back themselves. They come back dark and twisted and wrong, just like the soil itself. Tragically, the family lose their cat initially. You can see where that's going. And then one of their children. And they make the very foolish decision of burying them in the pet cemetery. This is a great, spooky, creepy read. I love the modern movie adaptation. Don't get me wrong, I love the 80s one as well. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. Toddlers aren't scary. They're just too darn cute, and they picked a particularly adorable actor to play the young, I guess, like reanimated corpse in the first film. So I preferred the new one in terms of scariness because it's an older child and it's much more creepy. But this, again, you've kind of got that otherworldliness that Stephen King does so well. The idea of incidents in the past literally tainting the location at which they happened, which is something that kind of Overlook covers as well. That this ground itself is made powerful but also evil by what happened there centuries before and the repercussions that has now. The idea of time not necessarily being one straight line, that things throughout time can affect way forward or way backwards. I love that about Stephen King. I love that idea that something that happened 100 years ago could affect, you know, something today, and something that happens today can affect something in the past. It's this idea that everything's kind of linked. I love it. And this is spooky. It's creepy. There are scary animals, scary children. It's a fantastic read, and it's one of my favorite Stephen King's. I love it. Definitely recommend it. I would say as well, when you're doing the movie adaptations, read the book first, because with most situations, and there are exceptions, the books are usually better than the movies. Finally, it's a big honker. Sorry, this is the biggest one that I'm including, but it's my favourite King, and I had to include it. This is Needful Things. This is one that I don't see people talking about as much. People talk a lot about The Shining and Pet Sematary and It and Carrie, and those get adaptations, and then they get new modern updated adaptations and TV adaptations, and they've inspired other things. This one, people on like the Bookstagram community and stuff don't talk about it as much, and it is my personal favourite. It is about the fictional town of Castle Rock, which incidentally I love because there is actually a Castle Rock here in Northern Ireland, that a gentleman moves to the town and he opens a shop called Needful Things. And the shop is, I don't know if you could give it a particular type of shop. It's not a clothes shop. It's not a, you know, book shop. It's a bit of everything. It's an eclectic kind of curio shop. But you will be guaranteed to find the one thing in the world that you desire most. Now, as you've guessed, the gentleman who opens this shop is no ordinary individual. What's his name again? I'm having a mind blank. What's his name? Cut this out. Mr. Gaunt. So Mr. Gaunt opens the shop, and he is in fact Satan. And each of the items are cursed. you're going to get exactly what you ask for, but also not what you want at all. Everything comes with a price, and that price is a lot higher than any monetary value could ever be. But Mr. Gaunt doesn't actually ask for payment in the traditional sense. He doesn't want money from you. He asks for a favour, a small favour. Just play a little prank on your neighbour, that's all. You play a little prank on them, and then this person, in exchange for this item, they plays a little prank on them. And before you know it, Castle Rock is in complete bloody chaos. The whole place goes to hell, literally. And it is just fantastic. I love it because it explores so many different characters who have very different issues, very different concerns, very different backgrounds and needs that he addresses. But one thing that they all have in common is that they want a quick fix, and that they willingly pay the prices that he asks and then suffer the consequences. And it's just a fantastic, fantastic read. I also love the movie adaptation. It's a really good one. I kind of wish they would update it. The most up-to-date version I've seen is Rick and Morty, on a side tangent, where they have literally Mr. Needful, and Rick, just to make a point, takes the curse off all the objects, so you get the positive thing, but you don't get the negative thing that goes with it. It's a great episode if you haven't seen it. But I know it's a big book, and I know it's a big read, but honestly, it is worth it. So those are my personal recommendations. If you're new to King, or maybe you have read Stephen King before, but you haven't read certain ones of the books that I've talked about, those are the ones that I think are great to kind of get you into the King vibe, to like introduce you to his style and his kind of mindset, and to get you hooked, basically, like myself, to the point that he is an automatic buy. As soon as a Stephen King book comes out, I'm going to want it. That's just the way that it is. He has incredibly loyal fan base for a reason. He is a good writer, and he knows his stuff. And these classics are what put him on the map back in the day, so definitely worth a read. Regarding the Mapiful map, again, I've put the link down below if you want to go and check out and make your own kind of version of that poster. They're not expensive, and it's a really cool way to have personalized individual art, you know, in honor of your favorite author, Stephen King, or whatever, if you want something that's like sweeter and nicer and all lovey-dovey, to do with your wedding day, a nice anniversary gift, wedding gift, birthday gift, whatever, go down below. I'm going to stick with horror. But that's me for now. If you could let me know in the comments what your King recommendations would be, what your favorite books are. Did you agree or disagree with my list? Let me know down below, but that's me for now. And I will see you again soon. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell, comment, like, do all that fun jazz, and I'll see you next time. Bye.